After getting my focus mount sorted out to my satisfaction, I can start putting the rest of this mount back together. I'll start here with the cam for the rangefinder. I'm just putting a smear of molybdenum paste on the inside of that and on the ramp itself. Not that the rangefinder cam will be particularly helpful on this camera, of course. This is only for the Retina 3S rangefinder camera that you'd need this. And there's 3 little retainer plates here. Need to be fitted back in place. There's plenty of clearance on this, but by putting a bit of lubricant on there, it stops it chattering. Otherwise, as it turns, you feel a distinct chatter. If it's completely dry, getting these 3 screws in place is always tricky because the hole in that little plate is very close to the diameter of the screw. There's no clearance to speak of. In this lens it doesn't make any difference which way you have these pieces facing, as long as the curve is correct, of course. They could face to the left or the right. On some cameras this little notch is important because it clears a screw hole, and this one it's not. Alright, well that's that part. That just moves smoothly, that's all I need it to do. Start putting components back in here. Check that these little pinions revolve smoothly. Put a smear of molybdenum paste on the surfaces there. This piece drops in and engages. That's moving properly. Now if the springs here, it was the larger of the 2 diameters wanted to go on there. Let's put this little separator plate in place. And the springs run around the outside edge of this, so I'm just going to wipe that with the tip of this toothpick to put a hint of molybdenum into that groove, or on the surface of that groove. This locates, so there's a slot there. This is symmetrical, this piece. This mounts on that slot. And its job is to keep things separated. Oh, it'd help if I put things in the right order. This pointer goes in. That slot must ride over that pin on that other piece. And this should drop down to the lower. That's it. Let's put this piece in. Just checking the feel of that. this separator is a little bit tight where it fits over the centre. Just stretch that out slightly, see if I can release some of that tension. So I really want it to be able to float on there, otherwise if it gets pushed down it will hold this down too firmly. Still tighter than I would like. Let's get that off. It's quite springy, this brass. I can't tell if I'm making much impression on it. Close but no cigar. That's better. The springs. The heavier of the two springs goes on there. That's good. The other pointer can go in, and we've got to get these timed correctly so that they are right up. That's hard against its end post. This one should be hard up against its end post. It appears to be right. Get its spring in place. This is the finer of the two springs. And always a bugger to get in place. Let's see if I can get that hooked over that post. That's that end. That's the other end. Now get that timed correctly, that's one tooth out. That looks correct. Just looking to make sure nothing's popped out of place. It looks okay. This piece goes on here. And then we're only left with closing this up. Now we've got to align the notch here in the brass ring with this tab on the focus scale ring. That controls the rangefinder cam. So I need to know where that is relative to something, and of course the fixing holes are the easiest thing to line it up to. This has got a little alignment hole here which lines up with a pin here, so I know which way round that goes on. It goes on that way round. So if I make sure that this is in line with that hole, I should be able to see that, and that's in line with that hole. I should be able to lower this over the top and fit everything in place. Like that. Stuff move freely. This is the one with the spring on it. This is the one with the depth, does the depth of field pointers. So I need to see that the pointers come together in the centre correctly and go out to the extremities correctly, and they do. So I can put my 4 screws in the back there now to hold this all together. 3 of them are just plain nickel plated screws. One of them's got the remnants of paint on it, which goes here. As usual, get all the screws in place, then tighten them up, although with that alignment pin here, it can't really get out of line. Not going to have any trouble. And do all 4 screws up. And that's our focus mount, all working smoothly. This is the diaphragm opening lever there, you can see moving. And this one here on the mount controls the depth of field pointers. That's all smooth. And turn my attention to the lens capsule now. Oh, we can take the ring off the front first. That is, grease is very sticky. The glass looks clean and the diaphragm's working well, but I want the rear group off because it's much easier to put this back together with a trick that I'll show you shortly. If the rear group is off at the camera, off the lens at the time, so I'll find something to get a good grip on that and unscrew it because it doesn't want to come. Try a friction tool. That did it. Pop that to one side. So these 2 components just need to be cleaned of all this grease here. So I'll do that over a piece of tissue, and I'll just use some naphtha. We'll start with this one. And it's pretty clogged up with thick grease, as you can see. And that's very sticky, that grease. Probably in an ideal world I would soak all that in degreaser and get it all nice and clean. But to do that safely I'd have to dismantle the diaphragm and the lens body there, and they are a bugger to get back together, and they're especially a bugger to get back together without damaging something permanently. And it doesn't otherwise need any work, so I'm not going to do it. You probably can't see here, but I can. I'm looking down on those threads and making sure that they appear to be clean right to the root of the thread. There's no dust or grease or any impacted rubbish in there. It's a multi-start thread, of course, so multi-start threads are always a bit more entertaining to get started. It doesn't need to be timed to the lens because we're going to set the focus once we put this back together anyway. Right, to this piece. There's quite an acreage of fine brass thread here, heavily impacted with that sticky grease, so it'll take a few cotton buds and a bit of solvent to get all that clean. Well, a couple of minutes later I've got those threads cleaned to my satisfaction, I think. I'm just checking the feel of that, see what it feels like. It feels pretty good. It's not as smooth as I'd like. I'm just going to cheat here. Drop some naphtha onto that ring, run it backwards and forwards. Now that'll polish off any rubbish that was still on there. It should just lift off with a cotton bud now. Yeah, that old grease, it had just gone really sticky. It had almost gone to the hardening stage where it goes like a lacquer. There, that's good. Absolutely smooth. That's just as I want it to be. There's a few marks on the back of that diaphragm. I'll see if they're going to move. They may not. I'm not going to disassemble the diaphragm. There's no obvious oil on it and it moves smoothly. No, those marks aren't going. I would say that they're probably very light corrosion. But they're not going to go anywhere and they're not going to cause a problem. Alright, that's good. I want to lubricate the thread here, and I'll use a bit of helical grease to do that. So it's quite light. It should run smoothly. Then I'll just pop a smear of this in half a dozen or 8 places around the outside. The threads do not need to be completely clogged with grease. That's counterproductive. It'll create an awful lot of drag if you do that. If the helical was very worn and sloppy, you can use grease to effectively take the slop out, but that's not the case here. Oh yeah, certainly that's smooth You can certainly feel the drag of that grease even though I didn't put much on there. It's smooth, feels good. So assembly time. Now the trick here, let's just check that those screws were very tight. This post, this black post, has to line up with that slot. This tab here that you see moving, that opens the aperture in the lens, that has to line up with this fork here. Achieving both at the same time is awkward, because as you can see the diaphragm here snaps down to somewhat smaller than the smallest setting. There's a trick. With the rear group off, I can open this up, drop a cotton bud into the blade and release it so that that's holding that partly open. Now take great care not to pull on this, because if you dislodge those blades you won't like the result. And now I can line up my levers and work out where they are relative to each other. And lower this into place. I can wriggle this into position. Where's that relative to? Over there, right. Somewhere around there. It should drop in. Where's my wooden block? I've got this propped up on the ring at the front that would retain the lens hood component, because that lifts that lens up high enough now that I can get this all in place. And I'm just lining my two parts up that I need to drop in, and hopefully that'll drop in place. That part's certainly lined up. The other part, the alignment pin that holds it in the body, is that lined up? Not yet. Pop that loosely back in place. This is not quite square on the tube. Do that retaining ring up at the front because it's loose and I want to be able to use it to rotate this lens slightly. Now that's just not on there square, that's my problem. You're not picking up that post. Oh, that lens is well out of square. That's it, it just dropped in. Okay, so that's in place. The diaphragm opens as it should. I'll tip this over without removing anything or letting it fall out of place. Just take that retainer ring back off that I was using as a prop. That's the sound of a dry thread. Good. Well, that's in place. I'll put my 3 screws and washers here to retain this, and then see about adjusting it to the correct position. And then finally, before I do any final adjustments there, of course I've got to put the rear group back in, because we won't be doing any focus adjustments with only half a lens. Right, we've got a screw in there so it's not going to fall over. You have to put the washers in first and then the screws, because the washers sort of tuck down into a groove in the outside of that ring. So you can't put the washer on the screw and then stick washer and screw in together. That won't work. Okay, that's right at the end of its travel by the feel of it, so we'll just move that ring, bring that lens forward in the mount. Yep, one of those screws up, check that it turns, it does, and it goes all the way down to the infinity position, so it's somewhere like correct. That's good. If I open the aperture up all the way, I should be able to blow any dust out of there and put that rear group back in place. That's fine. There's our rear group. Again, I'll use a friction tool to tighten that up. That's it. That lens can go on the camera body and I can adjust the focus. Since I was very happy with the infinity focus of this particular lens prior to taking the lens apart, I only need to make sure that it matches the viewfinder image now. So what I've got to do is just look through the finder at an infinity target, make sure that the split image looks correct at that distance, and if it doesn't, slacken these 3 screws and move the focus scale ring relative to the lens ring here until it does work. Well, a quick look shows me that it doesn't focus back as far as infinity, so I need to allow the lens to move further back in the mount, which basically means move this ring that way. Retighten those screws lightly and check again. Well, as luck would have it, that's spot on. Now that was just guesswork, of course. I just moved that an arbitrary amount, but as it happens, that's exactly where it needed to be. So next, we have the lens hood component. I'll give that a quick wipe just to make sure it's clean. There's a little post on here that lines up with a notch in the mount there, which basically ensures that this does not rotate. And we've got the retaining ring. Now the retaining ring, for reasons best known to no one, was a bit tight on this, a bit chattery. It's not sure what the story is there. Of course it's aluminium on aluminium, so it always makes for rough threads. Maybe I'll get a toothpick and shift that. It's yeah, it's not wanting to drop into place correctly. It's not sure what's going on there. It's going in. And a friction tool to do that up. That's it. I'm happy with that. So there we have it. The lens is nice and smooth in its action now. The aperture pointers all work well. Diaphragm opens and closes nicely. Let's set that down to somewhere where you can see that. That lens is dealt with, and all I need to do is deal with its mate.